Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, October 24th, 2025, and today we are talking about good disturbance. We are discussing how to fit compost into the amendment regimen, and it's Feedback Friday. So let's do it. All right. Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Harvest Day for all those who observe. Happy return to college basketball season, Cats fans. Going to be a fun winter in that regard. I hope everyone is doing well and is looking forward to a nice weekend. We don't personally have a ton of plans for the first time in 10 weeks or so, because although one of the kiddos has a basketball game, I ain't coaching that team, so I just get to sit there and chill. Speaking of chill, if I'm allowed the occasional logical segue, I think we have got our first frost this morning, or at least the temperature suggests that we have one, as it's hovering right around that 32 degree Fahrenheit range, or 0 degrees Celsius. I spent a little bit of yesterday afternoon just kind of like watching the various native bees and bugs and butterflies chilling in the buckwheat, because that will all likely be done after this freeze this morning. So gonna miss my bug friends. I mean, they'll be around, but they just won't be as happy, except the harlequin beetles. I'm not gonna miss them terribly. Anyway, it is Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about the flail mower and some things I'm terrible at farming. On the flail mower side, I showed a clip of just smashing some rye down and vetch with the flail mower, and at Alex Powell asked, quote, smashing cover crops with the flail mower with it not running, just to break the stems and lay it down rather than chop it up, end quote. So yes, not running. I will sometimes just run over a cover crop, as Mike is putting up here on the screen for the YouTube crowd. But to be clear, that's not necessarily a recommendation I'm making to smash cover crops with a non-engaged flail mower, but the flail mower can actually do a decent job of setting the cover crop down, and then, vetch sort of holds it down. For a better crimp, though, I prefer just running a rotary plow over because it's heavier. And again, I've talked about how I will use that for the clobber kill as well, by having the power harrow up really high and then engaging the PTO so it's spinning and just, clobbering the fire out of the cover crop residue. Maybe a whole rotary plow segment could be in order too. Anyway, once it's down, the cover crop, I will typically kill the cover crop with a tarp or something just to make sure it in fact does die. So it doesn't really matter what I put it down with. I've just found that sometimes the flail mower is fast. This cover crop, however, because it was hot and dry that week and the rye was just perfectly at milk stage, I had no real issues just smashing it down with a flail, and it stayed that way. Sometimes these decisions are just all situational, and you can make the call that makes the most sense in that moment. On the business end stuff that I discussed toward the end of that video, at Philiflom9952 wrote, quote, one thing I've found is important with continuing a business from farming is to devote a certain amount of your energy and production to research and development. The problem is finding the balance, because if I could, I would spend way more of my production potential on it. But you can often lose money that way. But if you don't put any into it, your clients can get bored. Sometimes nothing new you're trying out hits, sometimes it does, and when it does, it's worth it to be the only person around with a particular variety, end quote. Yeah, I think experimenting also just keeps it fresh for you as a farmer. As interesting and diverse as farming is, nothing is going to be fun if you just do it exactly the same way year in and year out. I'm at year 17, and as much as I love gardening, after you've grown tens of thousands of pounds of lettuce, it gets a little stale. That said, experiment small. Set aside a small bed for small trials. Don't be me, in other words. This entire place is an experiment sometimes. Small is safe. On Tuesday, we did a beaver episode finally, and lots of lively discussion over there. Certainly, beavers are a bit polarizing, which is not a sentence I thought I would ever say, but there are people who love and admire the beaver, and then those who have to deal with them. At Madtown Dope writes, quote, yeah, not everywhere is the same. I respect your opinion, but you can't speak for the whole country/world. Beavers destroy habitats as much as they help, end quote. So this person is not wrong that beavers destroy habitats. This is why I say they are second only to humans in their level of disturbance. But some things to keep in mind is that, yes, they cut down some trees that may, house some birds, and they may flood some nesting areas, etc. But the ultimate result is more biodiversity, more life, not less. When humans cut down a tree, we often pave over it. Game over. The beaver's disturbance may be harmful in the immediate, but beneficial in the long run. Humans, opposite. Moreover, in a world where biodiversity is scarce, like we have, created for ourselves today, the beaver's disturbance feels much bigger than in a world where we are not holding on for dear life just to protect each and every species of animals. More beavers lead to more biological abundance and a more biologically diverse world where we don't have to handle our ecology with kid gloves. And of course, I don't speak for anyone. I barely speak for myself. So, I'm not trying to speak for the world or anyone else. Anyway, more on disturbances in the third segment, though. Also, that day we talked about corn germination, and at DRG1042 asked, quote, why is there hardly any info about growing sweet corn organically, end quote. And I think there is some out there for sure, but I agree it's not a ton. Most of it comes from like the extension services. So it's actually pretty decent if you just look up organic sweet corn production and slap a .edu on the end in that search bar. And you should get some decent guidance there from like the extension offices. But some seed purveyors will also offer some guidance. I will say, though, that it's not a crop that gets a ton of attention from most organic professional market gardeners because they don't really bother with sweet corn beyond their own consumption, as it's an incredibly low profit crop. The seed is expensive, it's slow, the labor is high, the perishability is high, it's heavy, it has many pests, etc. So that could also be a contributing factor to why it feels like there's just not a ton of info out there on sweet corn production in organic systems. Anyway, on Wednesday, we had the great Mikey and Kez of Five Tails Farm on, which again, we will do once a month. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Several positive comments on there, like at Devin Clement, who writes, quote, I love the addition of the business-focused segments. I know I could for sure benefit from learning more about this side of farming, end quote. And I agree. I also, even after like a decade and a half of this, could still always use a little bit of help in that department myself. At Nick Zivs wrote, quote, great episode. Agritourism is huge in Europe, and honestly, some of my best stays when I backpacked solo around Europe were agriturismos in Italy. They often also offered meal options using their or other local produce, further expanding their income streams. Such a great way to vacation and experience something a lot of people don't when they travel to another region, end quote. Yeah, agree. And again, like we talked about in that episode, there has been this persistent stigma about farming that suggests if you're not just farming, you're not really farming, and that's just dumb. Relying solely on farming is possible, sure, but also it's risky. The weather is volatile, the markets are volatile, pests and diseases come and go, winters are a thing. If you can find ways to diversify so that you can have some financial stability and reduce your stress, you should, especially if it doesn't add a ton more work to your plate. So yeah, anyway, great episode. Love Mikey and Kez. Then on Thursday, we talked about the Master Gardener program and rabbit poop separately. On the Master Gardener courses, Patreon member Chad Hayes said that they took the courses in Manitoba and found the courses to be quite, quote, really interesting, a great introduction to botany and a general understanding of why/how things work like they do. It is focused a lot more on non-food gardens and local native plants/trees. There's an expectation that you'll be helping others with questions in the future, end quote. Chad gives a lot more detail in the post, which you can read over in the October show thread, Patreon members. At Ninian wrote, quote, I'm a master gardener in Washington State. We're volunteers who are trained to be liaisons between the state extension service and home gardeners. We're not allowed to offer advice to farmers who should be contacting their extension ag agent. A lot of what we do is interpreting research from the State Land Grant Institute to the public through several programs, including question and answer clinics, demonstration gardens, and classes for the home gardener, among others. I'd recommend that a newish home gardener look at classes that the master gardeners teach rather than training to be a volunteer master gardener. My county has one series of classes called Growing Groceries, for instance, end quote. Good stuff. And at Lee Kassab wrote, quote, also a master gardener who is absolutely not a master of anything related to gardening, laughing until crying emoji, but it was a good class, very informative, research-based information, free here in Davie County, North Carolina, connected me in with a very nice crew of local gardeners. In addition to the course, 40 hours of community gardening related volunteer work is required in the first year and 20 hours every year thereafter, end quote. So yeah, good to know all that stuff. Also, that day, as a quick correction, I said there are 8 Canadian provinces, but there are actually 10 Canadian provinces, so shouts to those who corrected me. Canada also has the best national anthem, far and away. Just saying, can't correct me on that. It's the best. Anyway, great stuff as always this week. Best comment section on the internet, as always. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about accounting for nutrients when applying compost. Yeah, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon question. So if this show brings you $2 or $5 worth of value each month, you can support us and get a little mini consultation live in front of the entire world of people who watch or listen to this show. Anyway, this one comes from Patreon member Tom Beatty, who writes, quote, "Hey, Jesse, I have a question concerning soil tests, amendments, and compost. I have a medium-sized garden in my backyard, around 300 square feet, that I put in the spring of 24. I live in North Texas, so we can keep something growing nearly all year. Just took out my last of the purple whole peas and put in my brassicas. When I put the garden in, I turned the soil over, mixed in a healthy amount of compost, and started growing, never bothering with a soil test. Because I've had something constantly growing in the beds for 2 years straight, including heavy feeders like tomatoes that went in April and are still producing, I decided to do a soil test and see if any heavy amending is needed. Our soil here is heavy clay, so I'm also wanting to add some more compost to help with drainage, soil compaction, etc. My question is this: how do you account for the nutrient load present in compost as it relates to the suggested amendments from the soil test? Without an NPK profile on the compost, are there any best practices to employ? I appreciate any insight you might have. Thanks, Tom." End quote. All right, great question here, Tom. And the reality is that if you're doing this professionally, by that I mean gardening, and you need or just want to really fine tune your production, you would also have to get the compost tested and ask the agronomist for their best possible advice on how to utilize the compost. Some agronomists, especially if you have high phosphorus levels and high phosphorus compost is determined by your test, will recommend you skip the compost for a season or two. I don't necessarily think this is bad advice per se, but instead of skipping it, I would just turn to using compost sparingly and more like an inoculant, compost tea, compost extract, that sort of stuff, than a fertilizer, while looking for some other amendments such as blood meals or alfalfa meal, etc., whatever that agronomist recommends. Now, of course, in a smaller, more home garden scale like what you have a little more flexibility, but obviously you don't want to pollute either. So it's good to know when you have too high of a nutrient level so that you're not adding a whole lot more to that. What about deep compost mulching, you might ask? Am I concerned with phosphorus in that scenario? Yes, but also to some extent, no. Phosphorus, when it comes from compost, is not a super mobile nutrient. It's attached to the soil particles and the compost particles. So if you're not in a wet climate and or near a waterway, I'm less concerned with the runoff issue that I would be concerned with in conventional agriculture. Though if you're near a waterway and the risk of soil or compost washing into said waterway is high, then my concern meter goes up a lot there. Indeed, you should be very considerate of nutrient levels in those scenarios. Now, things like phosphorus deficiencies can also be addressed with compost, as can soil organic matter levels, which often comes in really handy in the starting of a garden. However, excesses in certain nutrients, such as phosphorus, can also cause deficiencies in other nutrients. So if you're looking for a well-balanced garden, use compost smartly. I think that's a word, smartly. Now, with all that said, there is a difference between manure-based composts and plant-based compost. Manure-based composts tend to be more fertilizer-like, with higher concentrations of NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, as well as salts, whereas plant-based composts are a bit tamer. What I like to do is run the rock minerals that the garden needs, whatever deficiencies I'm seeing, through plant-based compost, so I'm getting readily available nutrients and the inoculation element without feeling like I'm overly applying the phosphorus. Sometimes that may mean I also have to add some blood meal or something along those lines to get the nitrogen up, or I will notice later that I should have done that. Another option for employing composts when the agronomists are suggesting you back off of composts is through things like teas and extracts, like I said. That way you are getting the inoculation element of the compost without the overload element of the nutrients. But I personally just love what composts bring to soil, plant-based, manure-based, or otherwise, so I try to find ways to employ composts that doesn't, harm the soil where I can. If you're looking for the best practices, though, an agronomist is going to be your best bet, and they will probably recommend some rock nutrients and that sort of stuff. Anyway, was that helpful? Not sure, but I hope so. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, it is time to be disturbing. And not just because it's almost Halloween, but not because of that. Be right back.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
So on Tuesday, when I did the Beaver episode, at Stephen Rowe wrote, quote, "Disturbance is a deep topic to discuss. My view is that as humans, this is our most significant impact on the planet. Disturbance can be immensely positive or incredibly negative in the whole range of the spectrum in between. Perhaps a future segment / show about all things disturbance. Love your work," end quote. And yeah, I think this is a really important concept to emphasize. Disturbance is natural, even necessary to some extent. Most creatures in the world disturb something. I have said this before, but if you were to take a cross-section of healthy soil and take a time-lapse video over a year, it would not look static. It would look like it was churning with worms and critters and roots just constantly moving the soil around and effectively, well, disturbing it, creating beneficial ecological disturbance. This is partially why I emphasize that disturbance and tillage are not inherently the same thing, because it depends on the goal and effect of the disturbance. For instance, if you broad fork the soil to break up compaction and it opens up lower levels to be more deeply penetrated by roots and fungi and water and soil life and all the things, that is beneficial disturbance. It did a small amount of disruption up front, but ultimately led to healthier soil. Not unlike the beavers, the broad fork disrupts the environment in the short term, but the long-term result is greater ecological health. For an opposite example, when you regularly smash the soil with a tiller, that is a harmful type of disturbance. The result isn't more soil organic matter, more soil life, more soil aggregation, it's less. The thing is, though, that disturbance in all facets of life is inevitable. We are big, clumsy creatures, humans. We have no choice but to affect the world around us and disturb it, but our disturbances are too often like laying down a giant slab of concrete followed by a giant concrete building that requires fossil fuels to heat and cool and light. That is a lot of disturbance, and none of it beneficial to anything but humans, which ultimately becomes not beneficial even to humans. As biodiversity collapses from these sorts of actions, so too do our pollinators, our beneficials, everything. So again, that's why I emphasized that day that we need to rethink our disturbances, all of them, both on an individual level and a large scale level. If we're going to disturb no matter what we do, whether it's shoving a plant in the ground or building a house, ideally those disturbances would have positive ecological impacts in the relatively near future, or at least at the absolute very least, they would have ecologically neutral ones. Obviously, all this show does pretty much is talk about what that beneficial disturbance would look like in a farming sense, but on the larger scale side, I think finding and sharing examples of what that could or does look like, such as, for an example, the proposed Forest Green Rovers Stadium built of timber with space set aside for native plantings and that sort of thing. And always feel free to give me ideas when you come across cool, architectural or community-based ideas. I think that sort of stuff is really important. But to be clear, the stadium is not perfect, but the thoughtful design behind it should be the absolute bare minimum for all construction. I also like seeing the ecological restoration projects that not only, reinvigorate the ecology of an area, but in effect bring more economy to those depleted, regions. Fishing and hunting and farming and tourism and ecological management jobs and all the things. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on good disturbances and your examples of it on larger scales. The world we live in currently is a lot of, almost exclusively, negative disturbance, but it doesn't have to be that way. We could, alter the course if we wanted to. It would just take some good, beneficial disturbance within our land management practices, but also cultural and political disturbances as well. We need people to see the value in caring, and that it is going to take some work because negative, harmful disturbances have enriched a number of powerful people, and those people spend lots of money keeping the rest of us from caring. Like that Wendell Berry quote, "There are not enough rich and powerful people to consume the whole world. For that, the rich and powerful need the help of countless ordinary people." So yeah, that's a problem that we have to disturb too. Disturb the apathy, disturb the complacency, disturb the people who want you to believe humans are perfect and can't have any effect on our planet. This incredible rock could be so much greener than it is, so much more resilient to climatic shifts and storms. It could be so much more abundant for everyone and everything on it. Just needs a lot more good disturbance. All right, Friday, I hate to say it, man, but we are done with you. So let us know what disturbance means to you. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a lovely weekend. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors, and if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear while I find my Patreon members. Pick up a hat like this one or like the green one, like the ones you see on the screen. We're actually getting a few more this week, so be on the lookout for that. Or pick up a copy of the Living Soul Handbook at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to James Olson, nailed that one, and Patrick Weaver. Shouts to you all for keeping the story going this week. And speaking of the story, our story this week is with our podcaster, protagonist, heroine, Mia, who went to look for a guest who had mysteriously disappeared while they were having, like, right in the middle of a conversation. So Mia drives down to Alabama to find said ecologist at his house, and she succeeds, except it's weird. He has no recollection of who she is or the conversation or really anything. He seems almost completely absent. He invites her inside, and when she gets in, it's just a complete mess. It looks like he hasn't cleaned in days. She sees a set of aquariums and realizes that these must be the toads that he studies, a small, unassuming toad that the indigenous people of the area called the ghost toad for reasons that no one was quite clear about. Then, because she's a podcaster and content creator, Mia takes out her camera and starts to record one of the frogs. And if you watch the recording, you wouldn't really see it happen. You wouldn't see the toad spit a liquid onto Mia's face and the sort of resulting paralysis, but you would catch a glimpse of that toad crawling, like kind of up Mia's arm and then sort of hopping onto her shoulder and then slowly climbing into her mouth. Then the next thing you would see is Mia and the ecologist going to the door with the toad in each hand and walking out into the street. Thanks for watching and or listening. Well, it's kind of got an October vibe to it. I like that. Anyway, thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you, let's call it Monday. Bye.